In the spring of 2017, the Tseshaht First Nation, the University of Victoria, and the Pacific Rim National Park Reserve entered into a 5-year collaboration agreement for archaeological research in the Broken Group Islands archipelago in Barkby Sound on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Presently within the national park, this area is the center of Tseshaht First Nation traditional territory. In July of the same year, a group of UVic Archaeology Field School students and volunteers, led by archaeologists with long-time experience in the area, began a multi-year excavation centered upon Keith Island. In an isolated location with no road connections, such as Keith Island, the logistics of equipment and crew movement is complicated and time-consuming. Base camp for the project was at Klakoa, the traditional name of the ancient and now uninhabited Tseshaht First Nation village on Nettle Island.
You tie it to that plank or whatever. It
won't hurt it?
No.
Okay.
The large quantities of food required for up to 26 project members arrives aboard the Francis Barclay, a coastal cargo vessel. After establishing camp, Arlene Armstrong, a Parks Canada staff member, presented a wildlife orientation to the excavation crew.
The story goes, they replicated, they reproduced, and overpopulated the islands here, and what has been happening over the past 50 years is that the wolf population on Vancouver Island has rebounded, and the wolves discovered this wonderful population of deer out here and have really set up shop. So it's very, very common that we have wolves out here.
Keith Island, the excavation site, was 15 minutes by boat from base camp. Radiocarbon dates extend occupation of Keith Island back at least 3,000 years. It remained a village until the mid-1950s. Today, it is the base of operations for the Tseshaht Beachkeepers, a team of First Nation members which maintains the National Park's campsites and provides cultural information to visitors.
I said my name is Apikutnis, also Kakmakimlh, and I come from Tseshaht. And my English name is Hank Gus. I'm one of the beachkeepers that works out here in the summertime. And this year will be our 5th year as a beachkeeper, and so the role of the beachkeeper is what we've been doing over the past 5 years is ensuring visitor safety, keeping track of how many people come and go from the park, answering any questions that they have. We are also there to support people when if there's any situations that arise that may require assistance. We are also search and rescue trained, but also part of our role is to share a part of who we are as Tseshaht. And I've grown so much as a part of this job, and it's not a job, it's just who I am. I'm going to sing the Tseshaht welcome song for you guys to properly welcome you all here. Hey, 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 ah, hey, 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 ah,
I just dropped them off and they're working on it.
After the welcome extended by beachkeeper Hank Gus, the first day on site consisted of laying out excavation units and orientation talks by the project's co-directors.
Almost.
Let's turn it around. Now I understand.
Jonathan, you want Jonathan over there? Okay.
No worries. But we already measured this.
Yep. The initial excavation units were placed at a higher elevation at the rear of the site. This was done in an attempt to locate remains of paleo beaches from periods of higher sea levels and the associated earliest evidence of human occupation. Other units were opened closer to the shoreline to recover materials from later manifestations of the village, which was occupied until the mid-20th century. Relatively modern artifacts, such as decorated doors of pot-bellied stoves, large log boom chains, remnants of pulley systems, and crockery fragments were recovered in the upper levels of these pits. These were underlain by objects of traditional First Nation manufacture.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So it might not need to be in the title.
Where's the level sheet?
Okay, so you can just say feature 2. Alright. So the form was correct that you just filled out and then just replace that with.
I need to write down these 3 numbers before I forget them.
Like below the data?
Cool.
I think it's going to be good enough. Yeah, because we had that 30 centimeters. No, I can reach it. Good go. A bit more than 2.5.
That's why I need a hand because I like scared.
Well, clearly you need to do a funnel.
Good.
7. Okay, so that comes down 3, this comes down 1.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you mean? And then do you know what's happening like right there?
Not. Do you want me to switch sides or is it
No, it's all good.
After we took the drill head off? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
dear? That is 76.
You're touching.
Okay, anyway, this village, there's a lot of unknown about the village. And that's hopefully what we're going to help solve, is the older history. We know in the last couple of 100 years, it was a seasonal village. It was sort of occupied February, March, on to late April, beginning of May, because then people would go to the outer islands, because weather would be a little bit more hospitable for the outer islands. So it was seasonal for several months a year, and it was occupied at the same time pretty much as Nettle, where we are, and Equus, which is just outside of the Broken Group on Seashore Channel. Those were the 3 sort of villages. But that's only in the last couple of 100 years, when after amalgamations had happened, where a number of First Nations all united under the leadership of the Tseshaht already have a date of about 3,000 years from probing. So that earlier history is just not known, because the later pattern that's documented fairly well is new. So we're going to hopefully extend the history back, and then serve a function, you know, and that is education primarily for Tseshaht, but also the more we can put out there to people who are visiting and the general lay public, the more respect that they have for the land. The more respect they have for, in this case, Tseshaht. Is what does wilderness imply? Think about what is the meaning in that word. It means lack of people. It's wild, it's wilderness. There's an absence of human impact and occupation and whatever. There are about, the last count, I think 168 archaeological sites just in the Broken Group. That means there's a lot of human activity here, and it's the natural and human presence interlocking that form a history of a place. So the more we can get history out there, because people come, they're amazed at the beauty. They go, oh, wow, the islands and whatever, and it's a sunny day, and there's the bright green of the trees, and there's the blue of the water, and the gray and whatever of the rocks, and if it's got any kind of swell, you get the foam and the white, you know, of the, so they're really stark and bands of color, and they're just, wow, and look at the eagles, and, you know, they see occasional whale, and it's all about nature. This is so beautiful. But they can't understand or respect or treat it as it should be until they know there are 2 rock solid pillars of importance out here in people. people who've been here for thousands of years deserve a huge mention and a huge acknowledgement. The more we learn, the more we share with Tseshaht. Of course, that's better for all concerned, but also that information that goes out to the public, that Tseshaht is comfortable that goes out to the public, the more they learn that, yes, we have two very important things out here, and only then can they truly respect what they're experiencing. And respect is really important. Knowledge hopefully brings respect.
What we're doing now in Barclay Sound is really a continuation of that culture historian approach, but with some really, really grounded anthropological observations and indigenous knowledge. And what we want to do in this field school is blend both the science of possible historical ecological data that we're going to be excavating through. All of the faunal remains that Denis was talking about have specific ecological significance, and changes over the last 4,000 years have dramatically reshaped how the coast looks. The forest compositions, the animals in the ocean, the intertidal zone, all of those things have had considerable change, and we want to track some of that change, environmental change. Think about this as a populated place, but then really come back to some of this culture history of who was living where, when, and how did that change and grow and expand. That resulted in sea levels that were 45 meters lower than modern. So that is when we came over from Banfield and we were in that deep water channel called Imperial Eagle Channel, that the shoreline was way out over there, and a couple kilometers towards Banfield, and that happened between about 11,000 years ago and 7,000 years ago in this area. So sea levels were rising meters every millennia. Oh yeah. Imagine a lot of muscle in there.
At the end of the workday, the return boat journey to our base camp brought relief to tired bodies, an opportunity to enjoy the beauty of the surrounding islands, and the anticipation of a fine meal produced by our talented cook.
A line somewhere in the water, that island that we can see down there.
The National Park Reserve, and when it was set up in the 70s, it was a reserve rather than just flat out national park.
Keith.
Yeah, he's right. No.
This is
Yeah.
Sons only or for me.
There is a daughter.
Because it is a very special
He's like from this one before they got close.
Yeah.
But now the people who own that now own Uncle Abe.
For many years, the Tseshaht First Nation has granted the use of their reserve on Nettle Island as a base camp for archaeological and ethnographic projects. Protected from storm winds with its 2 cabins and a wharf, it is an ideal location.
And here is right where Denis is standing, is probably exactly where we probed in 2012 and got a probe and radiocarbon dated the top of that sediment to 2,800 years ago. Maybe as old as 5,000 years at the bottom of the cultural deposits, if we can get to the bottom, and the top being about 2,800 years ago. So together, if we dig an elevated place like this and a place associated with a modern shoreline, we could capture much of the late Holocene. 5,000 years of known archaeological history is an incredibly powerful thing. But we are
You get a screening?
That'll include the wet screen. Should I do, like, should I put the cobbles in for you guys to take a look? Well, so I think I might go get one of our big buckets and fill it up with water and bring it up, so then we can do kind of a wash, like a wash here, just to make sure the cobbles aren't fine. Yeah. And then you can see there's ornament here.
Dry screening of the excavated cultural deposits was followed by a second stage wet screening process to ensure maximum recovery of faunal remains and artifacts.
That's muscle.
That's muscle. Okay.
Yep. They can definitely change colors though on the ground. Like it doesn't, the purple doesn't always come out.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have that much shellfish experience.
So like, how long does it take you to go 10 centimeters down?
Well, because of these rocks,
Ages.
public education is an important component of our projects, and daily tours are conducted for park visitors.
Sometimes a hearth is really obvious. You know, it's your standard like campfire with big ring of rocks, etc. This did have some flakes of charcoal. Any more coming up recently?
There's a lot of charcoal all in this section.
Okay, so these will get drawn and photographed, drawn to scale, and then removed so we can continue. So that's a feature. A feature as opposed to an artifact. A feature is kind of man-made, but it's kind of permanent. It's not meant to be portable. An artifact is portable, right? You're going fishing, you're going hunting, whatever, tool, you're working wood, so you're moving around with it. And so at the very top, when we just got below the top, we're finding things like very ornate cast iron potbelly stove doors. In the old days, they were very ornate with lots of, you know, they put the iron into a mold kind of thing. And files, and there was big chain links like boom chain, and bits and pieces, and then we got a pulley system just out of here this morning. So it goes from trowel into dustpan, dustpan into buckets, buckets into the screen, so you sift out the dirt, and then we go down as an extra level, we go down to the water side, when you may have noticed when you were coming in.
The Hakai Institute generously contributed 2 members of their geospatial drone team to record valuable aerial video of the islands and a number of archaeological sites they contain.
So usually when we go out in the field, we sometimes launch from a boat. It's just these little guys here. You just take them off from your hand, and a lot of times you're taking a lot of beautiful shots. But we're usually brought into either map eelgrass, which is what Luba's been doing a lot of, or archaeology sites, or you're just taking hundreds and hundreds of photos overlapping, and it's able to detect the changes between the different photos to be able to tell a 3D model of this space. This is how it's done. So we're taking all these images. You can see how they just overlapping. Sometimes we fly really low if we want to get really detailed. If you're interested in barnacles, you're flying right down. You can get little millimeter precision. Or we're flying up higher if you're looking at kelp or an entire island. So we'll give you a site map that people can study, not in the field, or people that can't easily get up in the field can have a much better idea of what a site looks like.
Social relationships that were represented in objects. These objects that we find archaeologically, artifacts that are indicative of their time and their social context in places that have names and histories that go back to 4,000, 5,000 years ago when you dig near the shore, near the modern day shoreline. And how much is 1,000 years of human history? What is going on in 1,000 years of human history? So that's what we get a chance to do here. It's a very, very special thing to work with material that has not been seen and been used for that long of a time.
I was doing archaeology. I think I've sort of touched upon this in the past. And I realized that I needed to do more rather than put holes in the ground and come up with really interesting stuff. But I had to be able to put it in the context. And so therefore I had to know more about Tseshaht history. I had to, and not just Tseshaht history, but Parkizan Nuchano, but primarily Tseshaht. And so I started working with elders. I worked with 23 elders, Nuchano elders, from Ahousit to Dididat, centered mostly in Parkizan. I didn't finish with one of them. They all died before I was finished. They all went with information. I think I mentioned the very first day to you how upset I was at all those funerals in the 70s and 80s, knowing that these people were dying, and some of them were the sole repositories, the only people left who knew bits, in pieces that others didn't know. So it was lost to humanity forever. They were the last people to know. To me, that's very upsetting because it represents us diminishing as human beings. When knowledge that has taken countless generations, the end result of maybe even thousands of years of increased experience and knowledge, and then suddenly the person who knows some aspect of that no one else does, they're gone. How do we allow that to happen? I don't know.
It must be that
With a week remaining in the 2017 field season, a filing unit was open on the lower level of the site. As with the other pit on this level, its excavation will continue in 2018.
we don't have two tapes, do we?
What is it you wanted?
I was just saying we should start putting dates on our tags for anything you take out into a bag or fauna or store it, shellfish. We should make sure we put dates on the tag so we don't get confused of when we found it or where it came from.
Another major contribution of the Hakai Institute was the use of their power core and 2 experienced operators. With such equipment, it's possible to take and preserve a vertical profile of the entire depth of the cultural deposits, thus preserving its stratigraphy, a sample of faunal remains, and datable materials.
So that's our first section. Unfortunately, it's a little bit fogged up, but you can still see the midden inside. So if you want to take a look at that, you can see the top here is the sort of the beginning of it, and then it gets into the nice rich midden there.
Something we've been finding, which is a bit of a surprise to us compared to what the coring you did in Trickett, we have been getting quite a bit of compaction here, Denis. With this the recent period stuff, it just hasn't been compacted by thousands of years of trees growing on it and stuff piling on it.
And people walking.
But you can see it's kind of looser up here. We have a stratigraphic change, still quite loose. And I noticed it getting kind of a lot harder as we got down. And that, I would say, is the change in stratigraphy there.
A lot of whole shells, almost like a layer of whole shells, and then below that was fragments. And so I just found that.
Below that was what, sorry?
Fragments. Yeah, it was mostly fragmented. And I've been on the wet screen a lot of the time. And it's just tons and tons of fragments of shell, not a lot of whole shell. More chitin here than I did over there. That may have changed since the couple days I've been working on this unit. But just so interesting that it's, not far apart, but there seems to be different representation, or at least different amounts.
Of stratigraphy, which proved to be very interesting. We hit what we think is an ancient beach layer with cobbles and water-worn pebbles, as well as a lot of gravel. You can see that pretty clearly on the east wall and also the south wall.
Ian and I delude ourselves that we're the most important people on the project. Wanda, because we can't keep people as happy as Wanda can.
An important component of each field season is a visit by Tseshaht First Nation staff and community members.
It's always exciting to be able to work with different entities, I guess. We had the Tseshaht here at our beautiful village of Kakmakimlh. So when we just started our 5-year archaeology collaborative agreement with Parks Canada and UVic. Thank all the other assistants, all the beachkeepers that are helping and looking after
and thank you,
our
Wanda.
area.
Wanda.
And most importantly, thank you, Wanda, for feeding everybody. It's exciting times. This is going to be happening for 5 years, hopefully longer. We've been doing different archaeology and surveys and different initiatives in this area. We're going to continue that. We're going to continue to learn more about our history and our people and our environment.
On behalf of everyone from UVic and many other places that they've come far, far away to be here, to work, to do this work, it's a real privilege. It's more than a privilege, it's an honor to be here working on this archaeology, on Tseshaht archaeology. And one of the things that we just heard Denis speak about is his dedication to place. And it's only through that sort of dedication over a good amount of time that understanding can get stronger. And so we want to contribute to that legacy, to contribute to Tseshaht archaeology, and also to thank Parks Canada for their support in enabling this to happen.
With the end of the 2017 season of excavation at Keith Island, the field school students and some of their instructors transferred to the Banfield Marine Sciences Center for an additional 3 weeks of lab-based work. They focused upon preliminary faunal identification of the materials recovered at Keith Island, as well as participating in several local ethnographic field trips in Tseshaht First Nation traditional territory.